Welcome to See You on the Other Side, where the world of the mysterious collides with the world of entertainment. A discussion of art, music, movies, spirituality, the weird, and self-discovery. And now, your hosts, musicians and entertainers who have their own weakness for the weird, Mike and Wendy from the band Sunspot.
Well, here we are again, Mike, and it's Friday. How are you doing today?
Oh, TGIF. That's what I always say. I sure do love Fridays.
Me too. It means the weekend's here.
Yep. And you know what I like doing on the weekend, Wendy?
What do you like doing on the weekend, Mike?
I like taking LSD.
All right. Well,
right.
that's funny you should mention that because guess what the topic of today's show is?
What is the topic of today's show?
LSD.
Oh my God. It's a whole episode about
so
LSD
crazy.
and its influence on pop culture just in time for your weekend to give you some tips and tell you all about how LSD has kind of affected arts and everything like that since it's been invented right around 80 years ago.
80 years ago.
That's right. LSD
Wow.
people were alive when it was invented. It's one of the newer hallucinogens and stuff like that. Not like, some things like magic mushrooms.
Oh, sure.
Have been around for centuries,
Right.
and people would take it and run with their spirit animal, and we'll talk about spirit animals and things like that.
Yeah.
Sometime soon.
No, but this is a newer to the human race kind of thing.
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely. So it's
But I still didn't realize it was that long ago that it was invented.
Yeah, lysergic acid dithylamide, and it was invented by a guy named Albert Hofmann in 1938, and he's working on it. And then he accidentally ingested it in 1943. Can you? Okay, so a hallucinogenic experience without knowing it's a
Unintentional.
hallucinogenic experience, without
Terrifying.
expecting. Like you just looking around, and all of a sudden,
Yeah.
the room is spinning, or you see trails,
Like
or,
Alice in Wonderland
absolutely
in real life.
It is right. So Albert in Wonderland is what happened to Albert in 1938, and he didn't die till 2008.
Wow.
Yeah, and so he was a firm believer in its use and
In its
things
health benefits.
In its health benefits. Well, I mean, we'll talk about that, but just as far as LSD's been around for 76 years. I said 80 years, I exaggerated, but 76 years.
Yeah, well, close enough.
It's just a little younger than my father, who, my dad's he would never be the type he's this real straight arrow kind of guy.
Right.
So I can't imagine him taking a journey to the center of his mind anytime.
It's not for squares, man.
Yeah, I think he tried. I think he tried meditation in the 70s.
Whoa.
Well, meditation, which can produce the kind of disassociative state,
Right.
over hours and over practice that people get.
But it's naturally acquired, not.
Yes, it's not a chemical that just
Right.
shoots through your head, kind of thing. But LSD. So you've heard the expression "sex, drugs, and rock and roll," right?
Of course.
Okay.
Heard it. I've lived it.
Yeah. The drug that they're talking about is LSD. So that's the particular, the drug that they're talking
Who's
about.
they?
Well, the people coined the phrase in the 1960s.
Okay.
Because throughout most of the 1960s, LSD was legal.
What?
Yeah. I mean, we're like, oh my God. But you'd ordered it in the back of magazines. Like
Sure.
LSD was something that it was just a chemical. People experimented with it. People tried it.
Yeah. So we should check the magazines now for the next drug that is presently legal but will be illegal. But
Absolutely.
Oh, wait.
If you want to have a good
magazine?
time, yeah, right. I've never read my magazine, so I'd go on the internet and just find different things you can try before the government makes it illegal, so you can experience something.
That's a horrible idea.
Well, because LSD it's not just a high. People would do things like people drink beer, smoke marijuana, do a line of blow or whatever.
Eat some magic mushrooms.
Well, no, mushrooms have the same.
They're in
effect.
the same. That's
They're
right.
The
they're
same,
in the
family. Where some people, most drugs are what's the word I'm looking for? When you just want to do things to have fun, hedonistic.
Oh, sure.
Most drugs are hedonistic. And,
Yeah.
when you get wasted, you don't necessarily have any kind of
Deep thoughts.
introspection or anything like that. You don't really go into yourself. Usually you're just like, oh, man. And then you end up watching Jerry Springer or something like that for a while. But LSD hallucinogen, that gives people, that's the California sunshine, that's the dream. That it puts them into their own mind and into their own state kind of thing, and gives them kind of a introspective effect that other drugs don't have.
Right, whereas other drugs usually give you, that they cause you to lose your inhibitions.
Right. I'm not saying
this is more...
I'm not saying people can't lose their inhibitions with LSD.
Yeah, but usually it's more like, let's take our pants off.
Yeah, it's not right. It's not just the inhibitions of like you're going out and then you might talk to a girl you wouldn't talk to. On LSD, you're going to talk to a tree.
Right.
Because the difference is that the barriers of the self in the mind that exist in our consciousness and stuff like that. Sam Harris talks about this a little bit in his Waking Up, the spirituality without religion kind of book, and he's got a little. We can link to that essay about it where he talks about, he's a neuroscientist and he actually advocates for the use of some different kinds of hallucinogenic drugs because it changes your perception of it changes your mind.
Health.
For good health. That's right.
No, but for good, experiencing life.
For experiencing life, because you can have the spiritual kind of experience that people feel where they feel connected to the rest of the world around them and they connected to other people. You lose the barriers of the self. And that, it can be a good thing because you feel connected with other people and you realize that maybe we're not as alone as we think we are. But it also can be a bad thing because you can do something stupid.
Yeah.
Because you're not quite living in reality. Some people might say it's a deeper reality. Sure, inside your head.
Right.
But strap yourself down so you don't jump off a building.
Do the Steve Jobs thing and go into the cornfield or whatever. Not cornfield, just an open field.
Right. Just go and do something weird. That's like
Steve Jobs. Sorry.
That's okay. Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs went into the field
and did his lysergic dithylamide. Anyway,
but
acid.
This is the first time on this program that we've talked about drugs in a, I don't want to say in a good way, but all the other we've done a lot of talking about heroin and the bad things that it's done to people, and
yes, but
there haven't been many conversations about any healthful benefits of
right. And the thing is, you can say that, oh yeah, opiates can be used in a positive manner on the battlefield, I guess, or whatever. Well, right. If somebody's in pain and you can reduce their pain, and morphine obviously is used in hospitals. But
it's not so much a health benefit that you'd be doing yourself a service.
And it's not saying that LSD is not a dangerous thing, because people do stupid stuff all the time, and they, and like anything, you can have a psychological addiction to, if you when you talk about losing the sense of the self and feeling connected to the world and seeing that layer underneath the conscious mind, there's no question that some people would rather stay there than hang out in the real world.
Yeah, and especially when you think about rock stars, the very egocentric, everything is about me.
Yeah.
So maybe being in the limelight and getting all that attention all the time might be nice for them to get a little escape and to get that deeper introspection.
Well, absolutely. And we can, just talking about the rock stars, first of all, Aldous Huxley, he wrote Brave New World, which is, one of the standards for the books on, being wary of the state and the different things they can do. He also wrote a book called The Doors of Perception, which is written about his experiments with mescaline, which is another hallucinogenic drug. And The Doors of Perception was the inspiration behind the band name for The Doors.
Oh, cool.
So Aldous Huxley, he moved to California and started taking LSD regularly. Oh, surprise, surprise. What? He moved to California and did drugs? Get out of here. But it's something he believed, and he even used LSD on his deathbed. He asked for it. He wanted to be, when he went, he wanted to be in that, that state.
Yeah.
and he wanted to, to feel that connection and to be stripped of the self. And
Well, that seems like a good time to do it too, because if there's any serious brain damage, well,
right, what's the worst that can happen? It's like, I'm already gone.
not going to be using that much longer.
Yeah. And the Doors, Jim Morrison, summer of 1965, he said he would visit nightly a fantastic rock concert that was going on in my head.
Oh yeah, man.
Yeah, so Jim Morrison, The Doors of Perception, songs like People Are Strange, Strange Days Indeed, and Break On Through to the Other Side.
Okay.
So the other side, breaking on through, had his breakthrough through that. And so, Jim was really into it, and he's one of the first examples. We were talking about Mama Cass in a previous episode, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how she haunts Dan Aykroyd's house.
That's right.
Well, if you watch the behind the music on the Doors, on the Mamas and the Papas, and everything now obviously has gotten weirder with the Mamas and the Papas since the daughter of the John Phillips came out and said, I had a sexual relationship with my father. Remember that?
That's right. Yeah, that was a while ago.
Yeah, that was nasty. So that kind of changes, like when you watch that behind the music. I don't know if they've shown that behind the music, but it kind of changes that because you're like, oh man,
right.
But
abusive situation.
They would talk about when they were recording this album, and that Mama Cass would come to them every morning with an eyedropper full of LSD, and that she'd put a little drop on their tongue, and that she'd be like, time for breakfast, time to start the day. Little eyedropper on the tongue.
Some people make eggs and waffles.
Right. Mama Cass, forget the ham sandwich. She was, right. She was on acid.
So is it always in liquid form?
Well, the chemicals are liquid, but people take it with a dropper. People take it in a sugar cube.
I see.
People take it. I guess the most famous one is a tab. So you have like a piece of paper that you gotta.
Yeah, like those breath strips.
Yeah, it's like
your mouth minty fresh.
It's like a breath strip for your mind, man. So, so the Doors obviously were really into it. Mama Cass was into it, but who else was into it?
Who?
The CIA.
Oh,
yeah, the CIA was into it too.
But they're not rock stars.
They're not rock stars, but there was an experiment called MK Ultra, and this relates because Muse has a cool song called MK Ultra.
Nice.
And this was mind control experiments on soldiers, prostitutes, and others in the 1950s.
Was that like the men who stare at goats?
Yeah, kind of like except they were looking for psychic powers and stuff.
Oh, okay.
These guys were trying to see like, okay, how can we brainwash? So if you do you ever see the Manchurian Candidate?
No.
Manchurian Candidate. I mean, I'll spoil it for you. It's about a guy.
Spoiler alert.
That gets brainwashed to kill the president.
Ooh.
Triggered to kill the president. And they made an update of it a few years ago. That was pretty good. But the brainwashing from the 1950s, the idea that like the Soviets or the North Koreans or the Chinese could take you and they could control your mind. They thought the CIA actually thought that this was a thing we could do.
Wow.
And now that they had LSD, which people have said like it changes their habits, like people stop biting their nails, people, they do certain
it
things.
alters their brain.
Because it alters your brain chemistry quickly. Mm-hmm. And if people have change of hearts about things, they forgive people. They do things in a certain way that if your neural pathways are going in a certain way and a shortcut too.
So
that's what they say. That's what mind control. That's how you would brainwash somebody.
So it's like the proverbial Kool-Aid.
That is the Kool-Aid. Right, it is the Kool-Aid, and they want to make you drink it. And so the CIA would have they had these experiments in the 1950s. An actual quote from the CIA memo was, "Can we get control of an individual to the point where he will do our bidding against his will and even against fundamental laws of nature, such as self-preservation?"
So they want to make like drones out of people. They want like just mindless.
And this is an actual thing. This isn't just we're not making this up.
The men who stared at goats. It's all kind of like exploring. They're looking for whatever tool or weapon, if you will,
right, would work,
and they're willing to try things that are outside of the known science world. And
this is the same kind of thing. The suggestibility, the fact that you could be a sleeper agent or something. You go back and you might not even know it. You might not,
Yeah.
you'd be activated. And so that's what MK Ultra was. They'd bring prostitutes back to a San Francisco safe house where they would unknowingly get drinks laced with LSD, and then their behavior was observed behind the two-way mirror.
Wow. So they were using them as their
Guinea
experiment.
pigs.
Oh,
And
man.
they didn't sign a waiver or anything like
terrible.
that. They would find prostitutes, lace their
That's
drinks, and
crazy.
just watch them. And you can see
Wow.
some of these on YouTube. You can go on, and some of these, a lot of it's been declassified. At least the stuff they
Yeah.
want us to know.
Right.
And they had willing subjects too. One of the first willing subjects was Ken Kesey, who wrote One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and he was also a big figure in the counterculture of the 1960s and 1970s. When we talk about counterculture in the 1960s, one of the things that we're talking about, and we're talking about the hippie movement, we're talking about the anti-war movement, we're talking about the people that thought they were fighting the mainstream. They also loved LSD. They're also big on LSD.
Okay.
It was seen as expanding your mind. What's the ultimate thing that your square parents aren't going to do, man?
I see.
And that's drop
Yeah.
acid.
Right.
And you have a Harvard professor, Timothy Leary. His motto was turn on, tune in, drop out.
Nice.
And his
Motto.
his motto, turn on and tune in, become part of the counterculture, drop out of the mainstream, take acid. He was the basis for, I don't know if you ever watched Fringe, but there was
Nay.
a character, it's a great show. I think most of it's on Netflix now, so it's worth watching. A great show. The character, Dr. Walter Bishop, was based on Timothy, one of the main
okay.
characters in the show. And he takes LSD every once in a while in the show. They show him doing that. Because he does experiments and
Yeah.
stuff like that on people's minds. And so he was the basis of this character in the show Fringe. And it's another way that LSD is kind of influencing the counter,
Yeah.
culture and
Well,
stuff.
there was an episode of Mad Men too where they experimented with it, and they showed the perspective of the characters as they were
That's
doing
right.
it. So I thought it was pretty funny.
That's all right. I forgot Roger drops acid.
Yeah.
He does.
Not just Roger, Betty and Don.
Oh yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. So, so it wasn't illegal yet, even though Don wouldn't care if something was legal or not.
Right, that guy.
Obviously. But that's the 1960s. The Beatles, John Lennon, George Harrison, they were dosed with LSD unknowingly by the dentist. Their dentist.
What?
Yeah.
Is it like, well, the laughing gas wasn't quite effective. Let's
So
try
that's-
something else.
Their dentist
That's scary.
gave them LSD. Right. If that happened at the dentist now, first of all, I'd get my teeth cleaned more.
Do you think that really that they weren't oh yeah, the dentist gave it to me?
Right. It was
I mean,
sure. That could have been
just sounds a little fishy.
it was a dentist. It really was.
right.
That is, that wasn't even close to an accent. But so Ringo, George, and John all tripped with the band The Byrds.
Oh,
To everything, do
Dun, dun.
drugs.
Oh.
And Peter Fonda, who was an easy rider, actor, kind of guy, And so they tripped with Peter Fonda, and Paul didn't though.
He's such a good boy.
Yes, he was.
That Paul.
He was good that day. But so they said that Peter Fonda just kept on saying, "I know what it's like to be dead," and then he said it over and over again, and then just annoyed everybody. So they were saying that Peter Fonda was a real pain to do drugs with.
Like that guy in Wayne's World. I love you, man. I know I love you.
I know what it's like to be dead. Shut up, Peter.
Okay.
And George Harrison was a big fan. He said, when two people take it at the same time, words become redundant. One can see what the other is thinking. You look at each other and you know.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so that's how George felt about it, and obviously it influenced some of their songs. Tomorrow Never Knows, another song. Actually, that song we talk about Mad Men. When Mad Men used that song, Tomorrow Never Knows, it was the highest amount ever paid
Really?
for a TV show or a movie
Oh,
to
wow.
use a song.
That's
It was like
amazing.
$250,000 to use that song.
They must have really wanted that song.
Right. Like they're like, man, it's got to be Tomorrow Never Knows.
Huh.
Really, for $250,000?
That is wild.
Right. Some of the.
Well, hey, good for the artists. Yay.
Yes. Right. Well, the Beatles. Two of them got a
yeah.
decent payday, or Michael Jackson's estate, or whatever. Got a payday. She said, I am the walrus. Obviously, I am the ape man. Woo! Like, yeah, that's just, we're just singing nonsense words. No, you're high as balls. And Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, which John said was written about a drawing that Julian did.
Oh, yeah.
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 Is it?
Not so much.
Come give me a break.
I don't know. Not exactly the most meaningful.
Right, but Lucian is like, what does it mean? Well, it means that, John was taking a little trip to the sixth dimension over there.
What about Judy in disguise with glasses?
That was definitely not on LSD.
That's the Squares version.
Yeah, that's for all the straights. I mean, some more famous LSD songs. White Rabbit by Jefferson
goodness.
Airplane.
I'm shocked.
Right. Do you think that was about? White Rabbit. Because it's Alice in Wonderland. You're following the rabbit.
Right.
Down the hole.
No, there's the Blue Man Group has a really cool part of their live show that they do with that song where it's like the lighting and the the whole visualization kind of thing.
I think it's something that these drugs are called psychedelics.
Right.
And the music was called psychedelic.
There you go.
So, I mean, sex,
Everything
drugs,
matches up
and rock
nicely.
and roll. Right. I mean, how did this chemical influence our culture? White Rabbit. I mean, Tomorrow Never Knows, obviously. I mean, when you talk about influence our culture, Tomorrow Never Knows, we just said is a song that's made tens of millions of dollars. White Rabbit's been played in every movie about Vietnam that exists. And a song called Sugar Town by Nancy Sinatra. So Frank's daughter was dropping the A. The Grateful Dead, obviously, they lived. That was their thing. They had live shows they'd call acid tests in the 1960s, and everybody was just expected to be on acid during the show. That was just the kind of thing that the Dead.
They don't let you
would
in
do.
unless you're.
And there's the song,
tripping.
Lakeshore Drive too. Which, it could be about that lovely, road in Chicago. Or it could be about LSD.
Nice. Oh, I got it. Clever.
Yeah, Lakeshore Drive. That's what they were into. And then when we get into the modern era, I mean, rave culture, UK dance culture and everything. I mean, they have a whole
Oh, man. Yeah. Raves for sure.
genre
See
called
that?
acid house.
Yeah.
Music, and trip hop. And the whole idea, the whole idea of, so another Grateful Dead line, what a long, strange trip it's been. And I think that's because at the end of an LSD trip, people often say they feel like they've gone on a journey.
Okay. Yeah, that would make sense.
And so that's why they like to do it with other people and things like that. And so they feel a connection to those people, even if it was just an 8-hour, 10-hour journey or something like that.
Well, they could read each other's minds,
According to George Harrison, he could read each other's minds.
So,
I mean, people do experience a thing. There is a knowing, I guess, where people look at each other and stuff, and they can say like, "Oh, there's some." I mean, reading each. Obviously, George was being poetic there, as an artist would want to be. Because if people could actually read each other's minds, then we'd all be dropping acid all the time just to figure out what I was thinking. I would do it just to figure out what women were thinking.
but I mean, if there could be like a psychic connection that is enhanced by a drug,
Yeah, and that
Maybe, I don't know.
that's something that, because LSD has finally been legalized to do research with again.
Yeah.
we're doing research tonight.
I gotta
baby.
do it. I gotta do a report.
Yeah,
My report's due
Right.
tomorrow.
I mean, it's not legalized as in we can't order it off the internet now or whatever. But researchers can finally use it again.
Okay.
Because the thing is, being emblematic of the anti-war movement and the counterculture, it gets made illegal because that's the way to get back at the hippies. That's the way to get back at the anti-war movement. And LSD doesn't even. I mean, it gets a Schedule 1 drug.
yeah.
So if you look at the schedule, it's funny that the drugs most associated with the hippies are the ones with the severest penalties. Marijuana, which is now legal in 3 states.
Yeah. But hasn't been legal at all for a long time.
Right, for 70, 80 years. And LSD are both in the Schedule 1 as the worst. Okay, even opiates like morphine and narcotics like cocaine are in Schedule 2.
Really?
Yeah. So it's like, I wonder why the government decided to make those things illegal right at the end of the 1960s and have like the super harsh punishments for them. The war on drugs, what could it be? I mean, it was Nixon's war on hippies. And of course, that was his political enemy, so that's what he decided to do. But we couldn't do research on LSD for 30-some years because of it. And so now it's legal again. People can do research. People can at least try to see how, we can study its effects on humans and things like that. And and we'll see what, effect it has on artists and everything like that going forward.
It'll be interesting now that it's back, or even like what types of research, what types of results come from the research that is now legally able to be done.
Yeah. I mean, just the idea that, people couldn't even do research on something when it was something that the CIA could. And it's sure the CIA can use it on prostitutes, but professors can't use it for research. No
and it's
problem.
clear there's a lot of questions remaining about it, so that research could be very valuable.
Exactly. And so, I mean, LSD, it's just a very interesting thing. It's a very modern phenomena, and we'll see what effect it has on art, and maybe we'll revisit in a later episode some more songs and movies and everything like that, because LSD has influenced so many films. Like, it's been such a lot of things. I used to work at a restaurant back in high school, at the end of high school. This was called Heaven City Restaurant, and the owners were big deadheads.
Okay.
And the chefs were all doing LSD. And they would talk about, like, I remember one guy, so I was sitting there at the bar. I wasn't drinking at the bar or anything like that. I was 18 years old. Sitting at the bar with the chef. And it was after
having
work.
A Coca-Cola.
I was having a Coca-Cola. And we were dividing up the tips, and I was talking to one of the chefs, or the assistant, not the main guy. But he was just like, oh, man, where do you think all our great ideas come from? He's like, acid, man. He's like, that's how we get so creative. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, oh, all right. And then I'm like, okay, well, I heard that if you take it more than 7 times, you can be declared legally insane. He's like, then call me crazy, brother. And I'm making him sound like a goober, Oh man, it's crazy. And he wasn't that. He was
he enjoyed it.
He was a stoner. He was a stoner stereotype. But these guys did their jobs. They did everything, and they advocated it for creativity in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Now, I wouldn't trust myself on LSD in the kitchen or something like that. I think I'd probably burn the place down. But these guys could do it, and it was just funny because that was my first, when somebody say like, drugs, and you'd be like, yeah, you're doing LSD in the kitchen? And I'm like, oh my God, I'm terrified. And they're just like, it's cool, man. This is... I was working there when Jerry Garcia, the guitar player from the Grateful Dead, passed away in 1995.
That's right. I remember
that. It was a day of tragedy.
It was probably like everyone wearing black. And
in that particular restaurant, it totally was. Like everybody like stopped and went out to go smoke weed to feel better, and then just left like the bus boy with the rest of it. Because people were like, where's the waiters? Where's my food?
I don't know how to make this.
I don't know, man. I'm just the guy that brings the water. But we'll talk more about Heaven City because it's got a ton of
I was just going to say,
ghost
that's
stories.
The place that was haunted.
Absolutely, there's some ghost stories about it.
Coincidence?
And I think not.
All right.
Well,
that was a good enlightening topic.
Enlightening, I think, is an excellent way to describe it.
I learned some things. And we will make sure to put notes up online at othersidepodcast.com/12.
Absolutely.
Hope everybody has a wonderful weekend.
And we'll see you on Tuesday.
Show notes for today's episode can be found at othersidepodcast.com/12.
Ooh, put your headphones on for this week's original Sunspot song. This one's dedicated to all those who journey to the center of their minds. This one's called Psychonaut.
On this trip
Thank you for listening to today's episode. You can find us online at OthersidePodcast.com. Until next time, see you on the other side.